Work on Temperance Tower couldn't be paused due to a medical emergency. The Vanguard got us from the 13th floor. When they got there, only KK and I were the only ones who could walk. Tanya and Troll-Lord were both still knocked out and had to be treated at St. Agatha's Hospital. KK and I were taken down to the ambulance, where they checked us out. I was, naturally, in perfect health. KK just kept insisting to the paramedics that she was fine. She didn't want to be checked out by the paramedics at all, not even to check her heartbeat. She was adamantly against being seen. I am refusing to be seen. I am well enough, as you can see, and I do not want to be evaluated. Bring me an AMA, KK told the paramedic. Paramedic was a woman with blue hair and a prosthetic arm. She held a digital oximeter in her hand, a device used for measuring a few different things, but would have required removing the Killer of Kemet's bandages and clipping it onto her fingers. Something that couldn't happen. Well, without your guardian's permission, we cannot accept your AMA, the paramedic said in confidence, only for KK to scoff in response. That's not actually true. In the 7 cities, children of the age of 10 or higher can sign for their own AMAs without parental knowledge nor consent. The only stipulation is I have to be conscious enough to request the AMA, sign the AMA, and to understand the stipulations. I am well enough for all three, KK said, while the paramedic tried a different route. Well, you've seen what happened to both Troll-Lord and Tanya. If it was that bad for them, there could be something bad that isn't easily visible. At least, let us check you out, the paramedic tried while KK crossed her arms. My point exactly. Those two were knocked out and they are still knocked out. When someone is knocked out for even a few seconds, there is a high risk of concussion. Someone knocked out for that long? Forget concussion. You're talking about brain bleeds, brain bruising, permanent brain damage. And that is just the first things I can think of. They should be at the hospital now, and you shouldn't be wasting precious minutes on someone who is clearly not concussed and is refusing help. Give me the AMA to sign and be on your way, KK said, which only produced a sigh from the paramedic, who brought out the AMA and a pen, and KK signed it. An AMA is, in simple terms, a form that says against medical advice that a patient is either refusing care or wanting to leave before the medical professional says it's okay. It gives the patients some autonomy over treatment and the doctor's protection from being sued. Naturally, there were high-profile cases every few weeks from one side of the AMA or the other, arguing whether patients deserve to have more control over it or if the doctor does. Still, with the form signed, the ambulance drove off, and I walked with KK, while Mr. Mad was busy filling out incident forms. That is a lot of medical information you have. Do you just study a lot of medicine, or what? I asked her, and she shook her head. I still have the doctor's knowledge from when I consumed him. A lot of it is useless in day-to-day life, but it comes in handy sometimes. I've already been seen by doctors who deal with eczema and enigmas. I don't have a physical heart, blood, brain, nothing. My bandages still create something approximating human body temperature. The odd part is my bandages, despite looking like gauze, are actually made from a mixture of keratin, muscle fibers, and epithelial cells. They don't need anything to stay alive, but they still move and grow, albeit slowly. She finished as she saw me staring. Sorry, too weird? She asked, and I shook my head before responding. That means your bows are made of flesh, I said, which brought a laugh from her. Part of her bandages on her head were shaped to look like it was covering hair, and some of the bandages were shaped like a bow. Yes, High Priest, my bows are made of flesh. I don't want to seem weird, but there's so much about myself I don't understand. And the more I learn, the weirder it gets. After I get my revenge on the Emperor, I am going to try to reverse what happened to me. There has to be science or magic or spell or something that can make me human again. I am understanding my curse and myself more and more. Someday I'll be able to separate myself from what makes me this, she said, gesturing down to her body. What are you going to do after your revenge and you have your body back? What do you mean? I mean, after your uncle moves on and you have a human body back, what does KK want to do? You have a life purpose driven by revenge and becoming human again. The hard question isn't what to do if you don't succeed. The answer to that question is easy. You keep trying. You try another spell. You try another experiment. You try another assassination. Or you try to do something new that you haven't tried before. Failures just mean you keep trying. But the harder question is what to do after you succeed. If you achieve your revenge, then you try to get your body back. Okay, a good goal. But then what? Do you keep going to school? What do you study? What do you even want to be when you grow up? Not just professionally, but what kind of person do you want to be? If you succeed in your life's mission with your entire life ahead of you, what's left for you to do? You have no more horizon because you already touched it. You have no more veil because you burned it. Nowhere left to sail because you touched every land you wanted to, I explained to her, only for her to be silent. Well, think about it. Think about what you like doing, what you want to do, and what you are good at. They are not all necessarily going to be the same thing, but if you can find something that applies to all three, it may be something you can do to give your life meaning and purpose. Sorry to put so much on you, but I have a lot of time for introspection, so I think about a lot of things, I said, and KK responded by just hugging me. I never considered what may come afterwards. I will have to think about it. Thank you, she said. I could feel two wet spots where her eyes would be, but when she let go, I couldn't see any tears on her face. Okay, you two, so good news, bad news. The good news is that the cleaning company was liable for the injury, so the school doesn't have to pay for their treatment, Mr. Mad told us, seemingly appearing out of nowhere yet again. I don't think we were concerned about that, Mr. Mad. But what is the bad news? KK said, which caused Mr. Mad to clasp his hands together. Since we are now 3 people down, everyone is going to have to contribute a little harder. And by everyone, I mean you two, he said, pointing at us with both his hands. We didn't do anything wrong, I told him. I was already upset it wasn't our fault, and he simply shrugged. Well, that's not how the real world works, High Priest. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. The problem has to be fixed. We could spend time trying to assign responsibility, or we can get it fixed, he said without a single trace of irony. You are assigning responsibility. You're making us work harder because other people got hurt. That's not fair. I told him, and Mr. Mad sighed and started to mock us. Do you know how often I have to hear that? That's not fair. He stole my homework. It shouldn't count for him. My house burned down. Can't I get an extension? That's not fair. That's not my fault. You're the one who changed homework policy without telling us. That's not fair. That wasn't in the contract we agreed to. That's not fair. What you're asking us to do is illegal. Get over it. Life isn't fair. You're getting a valuable lesson worth more than money. You get to build character. Now, we need the 13th floor cleaned out, and the other blocked off entrance needs to be unblocked before lunch today. Mr. Mad finished, and I checked my phone. Lunch was in 30 minutes. I don't even think we're going to get up there in 30 minutes. Can we please start after lunch? I asked him, only for him to laugh again. Yeah, no. That's not how it works in the real world. What do you think? In a real job, they will delay an important project so you can eat? No. You need to show your employers that you are serious. So, let me make it clear for you. Neither of you are getting lunch until the 13th floor is cleared out. Now, if you can clean it up in a timely manner, you might still have food down here when you get back. But you better be quick, otherwise it might run out. Everyone else has been working hard today. Mr. Mad finished, crossing his arms. When I opened my mouth to speak, he held up a single hand to silence me. If you say any variation of "it's not fair," I will make sure that the two of you will need to clean floors 14 and 12 also before lunch. If this was a real job, no employer would put up with you two arguing with me. Now, you will take lunch when I say you do, and you don't complain. I'd get started if I was you, he said, his face behind his mask unseen, but I was certain he was smiling. I clenched my fists, but I made my way back to the stairs with KK close by. When we were alone, I asked her, "Would you be able to eat him too?" I asked, and she shook her head. No point. I mean, physically, I could, but it would almost certainly get us in trouble. A vanished worker in a well-known profession in which giving your word is essentially announcing you are lying is one thing. Larry made his life where he was untraceable and where he could pick up and leave without warning. He has done it many times, and despite his old age and lack of a future, he planned to keep doing it. Mr. Mad, on the other hand, is tenured, powerful, and well known for keeping his word. If he disappears without a trace, foul play will be suspected, KK said with a sigh. If we're going to get back at him, it has to be done in such a way where it doesn't just appear untraceable to us, but we need someone else to take the fall. Mr. Mad isn't someone to let something happen to him and let it go. Even if he had absolutely no proof it was us, he would lash out at us because we convenienced him and he has power over us. Anything we did to strike back at him would only lead to a much larger aftershock. We cannot prevent the aftershock. All we can do is redirect the consequences to someone else. Or we just don't try to get back at Mr. Matt at all. Let him get away with it, I said with a sigh, and KK nodded. We both had bad experiences at Agamemnon's, and each time the headmaster, the ethics committee, and the student safety council always sided with the teacher. Agamemnon's Academy for Accelerated Apprenticeship valued discipline above all else. If that meant students getting denied dinner, students getting failing grades despite perfect scores, students being asked to do extracurricular activities just to stay in school, or students sent to the detention floor, or worse, students being sent to Strophia Stadium, asked to fight the teacher in front of the entire school to show the teachers as the powerful ones, well, as long as it reinforced discipline. So I highly doubt any of them would care about a teacher denying lunch until a task was done. We went up the many stairs again, and I tried to ignore my growling stomach. Every time it growled, I flexed my stomach muscles to keep it from growling. A trick I learned from all the times Father forgot I was at the house before Mother found me. Before we made it to the 13th floor, I made my decision. I'm not going to get back at Mr. Mad at all then. Whatever I could do to get back at him will only make things worse on someone else. So, I'm not going to get my revenge and set up someone else to get the punishment. That is who he is, but that's not who I am, I told KK, who only looked back at me. So, you're just going to forgive him? Trust me, it's not forgiveness. Just because I am putting up with it for now doesn't mean I won't wait for a chance later. And I have a right to be hangry, I told KK, who took a bag of chips out of her coveralls. Here, I snuck a few of these while you were talking with Mr. Mad, she said, and I thanked her as I quickly ate up the chips offered to me. When we made it to the 13th floor, it felt a lot less oppressive in the space. It was still dark, but it no longer felt like something was waiting in the darkness. We got to work. I wouldn't say we started quickly, but we got started. I put in headphones and I listened to the latest Mach 5 song while we pulled paper and tape off of the windows, putting the paper into large trash bags. When that was done, we agreed it would be easier to remove the blocked door before sweeping the floors. There wasn't a lot of dust on the floor, but with the chalk and dirt tracked in by us, it was clear that removing the other door block would also make a mess on the floor. The inside of the door block wasn't nearly as interesting as the outside. No marks nor graffiti, just a few scratches on the steel, about a centimeter deep. We both agreed not to think about it since the monster with golden eyes was now gone. KK pried the door block open, and the steel and brick fell to the floor on the other side. Probably should have checked first, KK said, and it brought a chuckle from me. As far as we could tell, everyone else was still down at lunch, even though we spent the last hour cleaning. After the doorway was open, we peered down the stairwell. This side hadn't been set up with a pulley system to drop the trash to the bottom floor. Are we gonna have to drag this to the other side? I asked, and KK shook her head. I'm not dragging it across that floor. That'll make things harder to clean up. I will put them on the ground floor myself, she said as her hands started to unravel. Can you unravel that much? I asked her, and she shrugged. I've never pushed myself that far, but given the mass of a human body, how much gauze I have on my body, and the distance from the 13th floor to the ground floor, I will have to say I am certain that I can do it. Wouldn't be logical if I couldn't, she said as she picked up the steel plate with the bricks piled on top of it, with 3 pieces of gauze as she held it above her head and lowered it slowly, while her other hand gripped the handrail, letting it unravel slowly to avoid damaging the stairs or hurting anyone. Wait, I'm pretty sure your skin has less surface area than the distance between the 13th floor and the ground floor, I told her, and she nodded. You are correct. My skin doesn't have that area. But my body isn't hollow. Not in the way you're thinking of, at least. Where my body was is gauze, making me nearly filled completely with gauze. So, the gauze I am using to unravel to the ground floor is from my internals. Are you okay? I asked, a shiver running up my body. The idea of my internal organs moving and being used to lift a heavy steel plate disturbed me to no end. KK just shook her head. I have no pain, no touch sensation at all. The only thing I feel is proprioception of where the gauze is, she told me before I realized something. Wait, you can feel where your gauze is in respect to where it is to other gauze? That's pretty cool, I told her, and she nodded. Yeah, it comes in handy when shaping my body to look, well, like a body. Otherwise, I would probably be a jumbled up mess, a pile on the floor, or a puddle of gauze. But nonetheless, you'll never guess where my hand is right now. On the ground floor? I asked her, and she nodded, letting go of the steel slab and the bricks piled down there, leaving it on the floor while she withdrew her hand from that floor. Well, that was exhilarating. Now time to sweep the floor, she said, grabbing a push broom while I grabbed mine. But then a question occurred to me. Wait, if you can do all that, couldn't you use your gauze to sweep up the entire floor instead of a broom? I asked her, only for her to chuckle. I know you mean well, but I hope you don't ever realize how messed up that is as a question. Even though I cannot feel it, and I am pretty sure I cannot get sick, the idea of using my internal organs as a broom doesn't appeal to me. It's one thing to use them to extend my reach. It's something else entirely to use them to pick up dirt. So, let's just sweep it up, she said with a flourish as we swept the floor. It took a long time, but while I swept back and forth, my mind thought about how to get below the lowest floor. The golden-eyed child with my face and the beautiful dress told me that I couldn't be reached via path, ramp, ladder, nor stair. Paths were esoteric ways of getting to places. Some people called them portals, doors, mirrors, but paths were the most common way of calling them. A certain action or ritual had to be performed to open them, but it would allow entrance to places it reasonably shouldn't. But if that way was closed, which makes sense since the tower creates an open paths, of course it would also be able to block them, then I had to find another way. No stairs nor ramp was obviously a reference to the stairwells. When Temperance Tower was built, CDA compliance was the last thing on any of the builders' minds. There were a few ramps that led into the basement, but since that could be reached, the basement wasn't the floor below the lowest floor. So, it must be a sub-basement. A sub-basement that isn't on any floor plan at all. That wasn't unheard of, but still unusual. So if I couldn't take a ladder, path, stair, nor ramp, what other way is there to get into the sub-basement? When I saw the bricked-over elevator, I had my answer. If I was on a crossroads, like the golden-eyed child said, and 4 different paths were blocked off, then the elevator was a 5th path no one would even consider because the power was off. If the power was off, how was I supposed to use the elevator? I listened to my music, pondering it, when I remembered an obscure bit of building code we talked about in Economica of Crimes class. High-rise buildings, like this, had an uninterrupted power supply specifically for the elevators. It was meant to last up to 90 minutes. It was supposed to allow the elevators to function even in the event of a power outage or an emergency that would require immediate evacuation. The power supply would draw from the local grid, if there was power, and only draw on that when the local grid wasn't available. Now, excited with the possibility of getting to the tower, I remembered everything I could about these power supplies. They were meant to be functional for a period of 3 to 5 years, some lasting even longer, with their longevity being a big selling point, so constant replacements weren't needed. So, if the power was cut off 6 months ago, if the power supply was still connected to the elevator, it would still have power, because not even a year had passed. Then again, it was based on a few assumptions. They could have disconnected the power supply when they cut the power, but conversely, they are definitely not the types to triple check their work. The power supply could have failed years ago when the building changed tenants. Maybe they never installed it, figuring they could get away with it. Or maybe the wires were non-functional. Who knows? Except there was an extremely easy way to test it. All we had to do was try to use the elevator on a different floor. If it worked, then it worked, and we could move forward. But if it didn't work, then we could try something else. We had all summer, so if there were failures, then we could keep trying. Once the floor was swept up and the debris thrown in the trash bags, I told KK my plan. I think we should head down to the 12th floor and try to use the elevator to get to the sub-basement. If it works, then we may have found the tower. If it doesn't work, then we might at least have a faster way downstairs. And even if there's no power, well, we won't be any worse off than we were before. Want to give it a try? I asked the Killer of Kemet, who shrugged. Sure, why not? Either it'll save us a lot of time, or we lose a few minutes. Let's give it a try, she said as I eagerly led us down to the 12th floor. This was clearly built for the apartments. The stairwell led immediately to a long hallway, full of doors marked with numbers. The elevator was built into the wall. This one was also marked in graffiti, marking it as being the tower, the exact same design as what was on the 18th floor. So this only made me feel more confident that I was on the right track. With the elevator, KK and I pressed the button for down. The button lit up in red, and we heard, deep in the building, the machinery that was moving as the elevator creaked and groaned on the way up. I turned to KK and she turned to me. I smiled large and I couldn't stop smiling. I was right, and we were on the right track. The doors creaked open and the paint pulled apart, and we could see the inside of the elevator. There were a few incandescent bulbs inside of the elevator, lighting a grudging red interior. The walls, ceiling, and floor were all coated in red carpet. There were brass handles along the edges that were worn smooth by years of hand oil. In the flickering light, for a moment, I thought I saw a skeletal figure in the corner and the golden-eyed child with my face in the other corner, both grinning and gesturing me to get inside. But as the lights warmed up, I could see it was empty despite the musty smell. No one had been here for a long time. We entered the elevator and I saw the panel. Sure enough, there were 19 floors listed, 2 vertical rows of 9 buttons, with a single button in between the 2 rows on the bottom. It started at 18 on the top left and 17 on the top right, and went down, skipping over floor 13, and on the bottom left was the button for the first floor, and on the bottom right was B for basement. But beneath the two rows in between them was a button marked as -1. It wasn't uncommon for -1 to be seen in elevators that went deep underground, but a shiver ran up my spine when I saw that button, like I was going somewhere I wasn't supposed to. But I steeled myself and pressed the -1 button. The doors slid shut and the lights flickered when the elevator jostled. When the lights came off, for a moment, in the darkness, I saw every square centimeter of the elevator was coated in buttons. The walls, the doors, the ceiling, even the floor were all covered in buttons. Every single one of them red from being pushed and from being coated in blood. But then the lights brightened again, and I saw that it was just an elevator with red carpet on the floors, walls, and ceilings. A strange place, but not the terror I saw just a moment ago. The elevator clunked and groaned as it continued to descend. "This isn't going to fall on us, is it?" KK asked, and I shook my head. Even if the canals above were torn apart, there's so many redundancies built in. We will descend to the nearest level and we will be let out. Okay, because it feels a lot deeper than 13 stories, she said. And I couldn't help but agree. Sure, the elevator was old, and I could hear the machinery strain, but still, we should be in the sub-basement by now. I looked up and I saw an old digital display. It must have been added after the elevator was built, but it was still working, but the numbers read didn't make any sense. It was in the -20s, and it was descending quickly. "Do you think the display is broken?" KK asked, and when she did, the lights flickered again, showing the many buttons of the elevator car again. A few of the ones on the wall were now dark, but there were still hundreds, or even thousands, left for the elevator to visit. "Did you see that?" I asked KK, and she nodded. "The tower is supposed to be below the lowest level." Oh, I said, as I finally understood. The golden-eyed child never said how far below the lowest level the tower was. And if the display, now reading -30, was a clue about anything, then it was far below the sub-basement. "Well, fuck. We have to stop this elevator," I said as I started trying all of the buttons I could see. Just in time for the lights to flicker again and the elevator return to normal. The panel had no emergency stop, no call button, not even an open or close button. Just the 19 buttons. Still, I tried pushing them all and nothing happened. The elevator continued to creak as it kept descending, now in the -40s, continuing deeper and deeper into the darkness.